Over 10 years ago, I had the privilege of meeting a very nice and interesting man by the name of David Lott. David himself, once a squadron leader in the Royal Air Force and expert in piloting the Harrier jump jet, approached me to help in assembling a manuscript, documents, and photos that he had discovered within his father's belongings after he was deceased back in 1989. It seems that, unbeknown to David, his father George had written memoirs regarding his time in the Royal Air Force from 1922 to 1959, where he joined as a boy mechanic at the age of 15 and retired some 37 years later at the rank of Air Vice Marshal, which is some feat. David just wanted to produce a book that he could hopefully pass down through the generations, and that's where he thought that I could help him. I had never assembled a book before, and although I was familiar with desktop publishing, assembling a book with text, photos, and documents is a reasonably challenging task if you don't have the experience. Anyway, I scanned the photos and documents in high resolution and done a few repairs to those that were badly damaged. Some photos were tiny, just a couple of inches square, but they were all unique photos that were otherwise undiscovered and never seen in public before. I would imagine that an autobiography from this era, including time served as squadron leader during World War II, that has not already been published is a rare thing, especially from someone that has had a long and distinguished career serving his country and rising through the ranks from such humble beginnings. It was a fantastic experience, and I think we produced a great book that I'm personally very proud of. Not necessarily because of the work that I did in the layout, but the fact that we actually achieved an interesting record and fulfilled the wishes of George Lott, and that his experience and life will now be preserved. Anyway, once the book was completed, it seemed obvious to make it available to the public. And if you're interested or should know of anyone that might be, the book is available in PDF format from georgelotsairforce.com. Link is below. It would make a great gift for someone that's interested in the Royal Air Force or just enjoys discovering information from that era. Its layout is exactly as the book that was printed, and there is a sample page that can be downloaded so you can check the compatibility and readability before committing to a purchase. I leave you now with a video that I recorded of David Lott giving more details about the project. Cheers for now.
Welcome to George Lott's Air Force. When my father died nearly 30 years ago, he left a note for me telling me about a box of papers, photographs, letters, and along inside with those things was a manuscript. And he hoped that I would look after it and pass it on down through the family, through the generations for their interest. But my son persuaded me that it would be a good idea if it was available to a much wider audience than that, because it is such an interesting story. So we went through it all, and with the help of many people, we combined the manuscript, which remains exactly the same, together with the photographs and the documents and various letters and other bits and pieces, and have produced this story of George Lott's Air Force between 1922 and 1959. He was a remarkable chap, joining the RAF at the age of 15 on the very first entry at RAF Halton in 1922, and graduated as an aircraft mechanic. He was called a boy entrant to start with, and he ended up in 1959 as an Air Vice Marshal. His career covered an enormous span from the 1920s as an aircraft mechanic to the early 30s flying the old biplane fighters, and then a time in the Middle East as an intelligence officer, and then on to the most remarkable perhaps, a period when he commanded a Hurricane Squadron in 1940. His career then went on via the United States and in various other different appointments until its completion. He was always a man of tremendous integrity, a massive sense of duty. He was very humble, as you will read when you have a look at the document, and also intelligent, courageous, and of a person of whom I'm immensely proud. My father was an inspirational man. He also commanded great respect. quite a disciplinarian, which of course is absolutely necessary in the military. But as a small boy, it wasn't quite as comfortable. And I was a naughty boy, as was my sister. But he dealt with us always fairly. And he had a great sense of humour and was great fun. And he was never happier after he'd retired than when he was with some of his old chums from the RAF days in the war. My father had one great big regret, and that was that on a certain day after he was shot down, about a month later, and he'd lost his eye, he visited his squadron, and there's a picture in the book where he's photographed with some other pilots, two of whom were killed an hour or two later, and he always regrets not running out with them and getting into a Hurricane and going up there and joining them in the battle. It's natural that I followed my father into the RAF, and at 16 I passed the tests to go to Cranwell, and they also gave me a flying scholarship, and I learnt to fly in a biplane and in a Tiger Moth. And I then went through my own career flying Hunters and then Harriers, which I flew for some 8 years, and I became an expert on that. So we had a great deal to talk about during his retirement and a great deal in common.